real answer to the danger of flying is not to stop the flights, but to stop the rockets which are endangering the flight.
Israeli military operation in Gaza must end.
I unequivocally reiterate to all actors in this conflict that civilians must not be targeted.
لقد آن الأوان لأن يرفع الجميع صوته عاليا.
Good evening. You're watching I-24 News. I'm Meredith Ross, and this is day 16 of Operation Protective Edge. Despite the heightened diplomatic activity, including visits to the region by UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, there is, as of yet, no ceasefire in sight. Kerry said progress in this direction has been made, but more time is needed. Meanwhile, the heavy fighting is continuing in the Gaza Strip, and Hamas rockets continue to target Israel. 3 Israeli paratroopers were killed early this morning in battle. A Thai national was killed today by a mortar shell fired from the Strip. His death and that of 5 soldiers brings the Israeli death toll to 35. That's 32 soldiers killed. The Palestinian death toll from Israeli airstrikes and the ground fighting now stands at 678 people. That's according to Palestinian sources. And in news from the last hour, the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva has decided to form an international investigative committee on alleged Israeli war crimes. Israel denounced the council's decision as a, quote, travesty. In the Strip, Israeli troops are continuing their search and destroy mission to uncover the tunnels dug by Hamas. At least 28 tunnels and 60 tunnel shafts have been found. Israel also says it has destroyed between 30 to 40% of Hamas's missile arsenal. Meanwhile, foreign airlines are continuing their suspension of flights to Israel. Lufthansa, Delta, and U.S. Airways, among other carriers, announced they would not be resuming flights to the country. Some 160 flights to and from Israel have been canceled. And with me in the studio now are Reserve Colonel Dr. Barak Mansour, an expert on strategic intelligence and counterterrorism. Thank you very much for being here. And Reserve Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Anat Burko, a terrorism expert and government advisor of the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya. Thank you very much for being here. But before we delve into the conversation, we are going live now to the defense headquarters in Tel Aviv, where our diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev is standing by. Tal, we understand there that U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Prime Minister Netanyahu are meeting. Any words of what's being discussed or when any statement will be made?
Well, good evening, Meredith. Netanyahu and Kerry decided to have just a very short photo opportunity without any statements, and many reporters noticed that none of them looked very satisfied with the meeting or very enthusiastic about the meeting. But let's first do a short recap about Kerry's day here in the region. It's the first time he arrives in Israel since the collapse of peace talks in April. So he arrives early this morning on his military plane, despite the FAA ban of American flights to Israel. And he immediately goes to meet Ban Ki-moon in Jerusalem, the UN Secretary General, to get an update of his negotiations with the Israelis and the Palestinians in the last hours. After that, he continues to the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah, sits with him for a few hours, pays a short visit to the Israeli President Shimon Peres, who tomorrow will be ending his term, and then arrives here in Tel Aviv to meet Netanyahu. And in between, he also has time to pay condolences to the family of Max Steinberg, one of the IDF soldiers that were killed, unfortunately, in Gaza in the past few days. And also he meets with Racheli Frenkel, the mother of Naftali Frenkel, one of the 3 murdered teenagers a month ago, the 3 murdered Israeli teenagers murdered a month ago. So Kerry definitely has a very busy schedule, but he is definitely focused on promoting the ceasefire understandings. And at this moment, the Palestinian proposal is a joint proposal by both Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and the Hamas, proposing some changes to the Egyptian ceasefire initiative. It is still not clear if Egypt accepts these changes or if Israel accepts these changes. It has to do a lot with American assurances to opening the border crossings into Gaza. And this is the focus of the meeting between Netanyahu and Kerry this evening. We might say later on this evening, the Security Cabinet will convene, and they will discuss either further steps in Gaza or accepting the ceasefire initiative as it is proposed now. Palestinian media outlets have been quoting in the past hour Hamas sources saying that a truce might be announced within hours. Well, Israeli sources we speak to do not know of any kind of truce, and judging by the words of the Defense Minister Moshe Yaalon earlier today, he speaks to IDF soldiers on the front, and he says we are preparing for further operations in Gaza after finishing dealing with the tunnels. Anyway, it's going to be a very tense cabinet meeting tonight because there are ministers in the cabinet calling not to accept a ceasefire and continue the operation and reach other goals.
Tal Shaled, thank you very much for these updates. And now, as Tal was just saying, I mean, there's a lot of talk of whether there's going to be a ceasefire agreement, whether there's not going to be. Where does Israel stand at this point?
Well, we are in the middle of the operation. If you are looking to the Hamas capabilities, we can point on three levels of capabilities. The first is the rocket launching. We have a variety of rockets starting with 107 millimeters going to 122 Grad rockets, and the long range of 2 millimeters. And they are, I think, today, after using 70% of their storage. The second ability is the tunnels that they used in order to penetrate and conduct terror attacks on Israeli soil. And this capability is diminished, and the Israeli regular troops and army units are dealing precisely with those capabilities. The third capability is the belt of defense around the Gaza Strip. This is a complicated situation that I think they invested a lot in order to establish a very strong defense line. But as we are watching the six-day war against this kind of capability, slowly, step after step, in order not to hit civilians, the Israeli advances slowly inside to Gaza City. When we are looking to this operational military situation and comparing it with the declarations of the military branch of Hamas, well, this is a question because they are standing still, they are avoiding, they are ignoring the requests from the international arena, from Arab countries that are considered to be moderated. And the Israeli point that I think accepted the Egyptian offer to stop the fire and start a kind of a truce. And due to that, the military pressure should keep going on.
But did you think Israel expected so many Palestinian casualties?
Well, the problem is that Hamas located their defense lines, the launching pods of the rockets, and their headquarters and their storage of ammunition in the center of the residential area.
In hospitals, actually, in hospitals, mosques, under the ground, all other those places, and using the human shields, you know.
Yeah, this is it's done intentionally. That's the way they are doing things from the very beginning. They are aiming to civilian population. If we are looking in a brief background of their activity, starting in 1993 with the first suicide attack against Israelis, you can clearly see that 80% of the casualties in those 2 decades of the 90s and the first 10 years of the second Intifada, 80% of the casualties were purely civilians.
And Dr. Berko, we're seeing this kind of dirty fighting also in Iraq and Syria. Is it any different?
I don't think so. I think that it's more of the same. You have the organization, and the ideology is the same ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood. You have Al-Qaeda, you have Jabhat al-Nusra, you have ISIS. You have the same ideology. They are part of the game. And if the UN would like to deal just with Hamas and Israel, and now they're speaking about human rights after they targeting civilians with missiles, they will get it in Europe, in America. The same thing. You know, there is a wonderful sentence in Arabic that clarifies everything. We'll start with Shabbat and finish on Sunday. So they'll start with the Jews, Shabbat, and finish with Sunday. The Christians, they wouldn't stop here. And Hamas actually succeeded to cancel the border between Israel and Gaza by using the tunnels and hiding and using the human shields and hiding inside hospitals and other places and using the children as human shield. And nobody speak about the abuse of children. This is amazing to see that.
And how are Gazans feeling right now? Is there a feeling of victory in Gaza?
I think that when they actually shut down the Ben Gurion airport, they have a feeling, a sense of victory. But I don't know if they feel a victory when they look around and they see all the ruined houses and the whole environment.
And the more than 600 people killed.
Right,
obviously, some of these members
and
of
a lot
Hamas,
of refugees inside Gaza. So it's like somebody need to stop that, but to demilitarize them and to open this zone from weapon, because it wouldn't stop here. There will be another round and another round and another round, and Israel wouldn't give up, because it's like they are targeting civilians with missiles. And if it was another country, I think that they would not, you know, one time I gave a lecture at Columbia University, and I asked the students and faculty that came with Kafia, what would America would do if from Mexico, from Tijuana, they would shoot missiles towards San Diego, for example? An Iraqi student told me, they will turn it to a parking lot, like that. Israel didn't do that. Could do that in 5 minutes, but didn't do that, and sacrifice soldiers and civilians for this. But Hamas needs to be responsible for his own citizens, because it's Islamic Emirate there, sovereign Islamic Emirate, and they are the governor there.
And we will revisit this, but efforts to reach a ceasefire have seen stepped up diplomatic activity in the past 24 hours. As we've said, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry arrived in Israel today from Cairo and will meet leaders of Israeli and the Palestinian Authority as he pursues the elusive truce. I-24 News correspondent Uri Shapira has more.
Much ado and no ceasefire may summarize the last day's efforts to reach a truce to end the offensive in Gaza. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry arrived in Israel Wednesday and joined UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon before meeting separately with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. This meeting with Ben, just like the numerous talks of the last few days, did not end with a magical solution to end the fighting. However, both men agree that some progress has been made towards a truce.
The UN is wholeheartedly in this effort to try to see if we can advance not just a ceasefire, but a sustainable process going forward.
Now we are now joining our forces and strength to make a ceasefire as soon as possible.
In the meantime, Israel is facing more sharp criticism, this time from Geneva. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Navi Pillay, suggested that Israel has committed war crimes by killing civilians. Despite the criticism, IDF continued to operate in Gaza today, and at least 28 tunnels were destroyed.
The crippling effects of the Israeli blockade and other measures linked to the Israeli occupation of Gaza, I reiterate my numerous calls for this blockade to be lifted once and for all.
As the conversation continues, it seems that both sides are quite close to sign a ceasefire, but perhaps not ready to give the last push toward the final truce. The Netanyahu administration is still determined to uncover and destroy as many of the tunnels in the Gaza Strip as it can, while Hamas is sticking to some of its demands, such as lifting the siege on Gaza. Can they compromise? The answer to that will become clear in the next few hours, or perhaps not.
And as we just heard, the UN human rights chief just called for the lifting of a blockade on Gaza. What challenges are presented there?
Well, firstly, we have to assure that any arrangements after this operation will be based on something reliable, with supervision and things that can be done in order to dismantle the capabilities of the armed group that is called Hamas from its ability to reach almost every town in Israel and cause let's say, disturbance and instability, not just in Israel, but in all the region. Because it's not reasonable that a group of people that really, if you are comparing just the casualties of the Israeli army, look to the casualties of the Israeli army. You will find there the first, in the first line, the commanders that are leading and conducting the paratroops and the armored divisions and units into Gaza. They are the first casualties of the Israeli army. And look to the Hamas. You will not find any prominent figure in those people that were captured or those people that were killed, because they are standing behind the human shield, as Anat said before, and they are conducting from those tunnels and posts deep in the ground the battlefield and the combat against the Israeli army.
But you know that according to the thing that you say, one time one of the terrorists, dispatcher of suicide bombers that I interviewed, told me that everybody has his job. He needs to dispatch the suicide bomber, he's the commander, and the other guy needs to die. So, and in the IDF, both of us served in the IDF and long-term, service in security agencies. We know that the commander are in the front line, and you see the officer. When you see the Hamas hiding in the tunnels and, just sending others to do their job. And they actually also send their children out of Gaza. Their children are not there. And let me tell you something that one of Shahid's mother told me, Shahid's martyr, told me, Mom, she told me, you know what? We know that Hania and Azahar send their own children to Ivy League universities in America to get the best education, and we pay the price.
So you're saying there is a stark difference between the leadership and the just everyday civilian there. But we do now go to the Gaza border for an update from our correspondent, Jonathan Regev. Jonathan, what can you report from there?
I can report, Meredith, that for the past hour or so, the shelling has intensified from Israel towards the Gaza Strip after a rather quiet afternoon that perhaps can be attributed to the humanitarian ceasefire that was declared by the Red Cross. Over the past hour, we're hearing heavy shelling, not so much on Shujaiya neighborhood that's right behind us, but north of us, Bet Laya, Bet Hanun, the northern Gaza neighborhoods, and south of us as well, Khan Yunis, Rafah, all those villages to the in the southern Gaza Strip, especially that direction to the south. This evening, very heavy shelling. We're also hearing of a building where supposedly some leaders of the Islamic Jihad may have been. That building was targeted as well. So basically to the north and the south of the Gaza Strip, heavy shelling. Not so much, at least for now, here in the central Gaza Strip where we are located.
Jonathan, thank you very much for these updates. And we go now live to the city of Ashkelon, where our reporter Shai Ben-Ari is standing by. This city has seen a lot of rocket fire from the Gaza Strip. What's the latest?
Yes, Meredith. Well, it has quieted down over the past few hours. The latest that we heard was around 6 o'clock. We could hear thuds representing interceptions. Not far away, we know that Ashdod was targeted, and also Kiryat Malachi, and earlier Beersheba. And Ashkelon was mainly in the morning. There were about 5 air raid sirens going off today here. Overall, we understand around 80 rockets have been fired towards Israel this day, and the night is still young. There is every expectation that that number may rise, and what this means is that really we are not seeing a major drop as far as the rocket fire from Gaza. These capabilities, Hamas's rocket firing capabilities, remain intact, and that is a worrying sign for the Israeli side. Of course, with this ground operation ongoing, there was perhaps an expectation that there would be a more significant damage done to the rocket firing apparatus. That is apparently not the case. There has been damage done. Some estimates put the number of rockets still left in Hamas hands at around 4,000. It's difficult to make those kinds of estimates, but that is the number being thrown around, and that is a substantial number. We're not near the end if Hamas indeed intends to fire all those rockets. We'll see exactly what happens, but this problem still exists, certainly.
Shai Ben-Ari, thank you for these updates. And what's the most accurate number of the amount of arsenal that the IDF has destroyed of Hamas?
Well, as I saw the published figures, they had something like 9,000 rockets for the short and long range, as I mentioned. And I think that 3,500 were destroyed by the Israeli operational measures. And they launched to Israel something like 2,500. The meaning of that they used already between 65 to 70% of their storage.
And now, considering this, how hard of a hit is this to Hamas?
Well, those 3 levels of activity, the rocket launching, the special operations, the terror attacks through the tunnels, and the line of defense around Gaza, starting with Tatra, going to Bet Hanun and Bet Lahia, going south to Tufah and Sajaiya, and now the area of Khan Yunis is mentioned.
Yes, I do want to get to this point of the different areas being hit, but joining us now on the phone is Chris Gunness, spokesman for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Good evening, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. My pleasure.
What can you tell us about the current situation in Gaza?
Well, it's unimaginably catastrophic for civilians in particular. I can give you some breaking news. We now have 140,000 displaced people taking refuge in 83 UNRWA shelters across the Gaza Strip. These people are fleeing the dramatically intensified ground offensive, and we are doing our best. We've prioritized water and food on obviously health and hygiene, because imagine a school in Israel that's built for 1,000 kids to come in the morning and leave in the afternoon. And imagine that school being taken over by thousands of people 24/7 with their families. They need hygiene, they need food, they need water, and don't forget that because of the blockade...
Right, and Chris, you mentioned schools. More rockets were found in another UNRWA school, and the last time we spoke with you, you said thorough searches had been carried out. What's your response to this?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part of the question.
The last time we spoke with you, you said that searches had been carried out following the discovery of rockets in one of your schools. Well, another school was discovered to have rockets inside of it. What's your response to this?
Well, I mean, don't forget, there's a war raging, and UNRWA in peace times, such as you can ever call Gaza peaceful, has a whole range of neutrality work. We carry out regular inspections of all our facilities, and even with the war raging, unarmed humanitarian workers in very, very difficult circumstances are doing their best to carry out these inspections as part of our neutrality work. And in the course of one of those inspections, we again came across a cache of weapons. And as we did before, we immediately notified the Israeli authorities. We immediately notified all of the relevant stakeholders. We proactively.
But what did you do? What did you do with the missiles? Because UNRWA handed over rockets found in one of your schools to the authorities in the Gaza Strip. But isn't Hamas, the group that put the rockets there, part of the authorities? Did you not just hand over the rockets to the very people that put them in your school?
I'd like to know what evidence you have that Hamas put the rockets there.
I mean, this is so. Who else is putting them there? Who else has control of arsenal in Gaza?
I'm curious to know, genuinely curious to know, what evidence you have that Hamas put the rockets there. Please answer that question.
Who else could put it there? Who else has the funds from Qatar and other Middle Eastern countries to purchase this, ties with Iran? Who else? The civilians?
We genuinely do not know who put those there. There is an investigation. We immediately decided to open up a board of inquiry which will look into a whole range of issues around this. Let us see what this turns up, because there are a whole load of issues, including issues about the conduct of our staff, about how it was handled. We have to get a very full picture of what actually went on. But, I say again, we are trying to do these neutrality inspections. We're unarmed humanitarian workers.
Of course, we do understand that, Chris, and unfortunately that is all the time we have, but we do want to make it clear that everyone does hope for peace and quiet in the Gaza Strip. Thank you very much for joining us, Chris.
Indeed. Many, many thanks. Thank you. Bye-bye.
He doesn't know.
What is your response
to this? He doesn't know. The UNRWA doesn't know from where came all those rockets inside this school. UNRWA, it's an organization that actually collaborate with the Hamas. Many Hamas members are inside the organization, working there.
Is this something they're hiding? Is this an open...
We're speaking about 4 million refugees in this area. And UNRWA speaking about 66 years of being a specialist organization just for the Palestinian refugees. You know what? It's about time they are all around the Middle East that they will take care of the real refugees in this area. The real refugees now from Syria, from Lebanon, people that from Iraq. You have so many refugees. But to say that he doesn't know that it's belonged to the Hamas and the Hamas declare that they are shooting missiles and firing Israel, it's like, it's ridiculous.
An interesting point there. But unfortunately, that is all the time we have for this segment. Dr. Bensour and Dr. Berko, thank you very much for being with us this evening on this panel.
Thank you, Meredith.
And we are going out to a short 2-minute break. Join us again.
The real answer to the danger of flying is not to stop the flights, but to stop the rockets which are endangering the flight.
Israeli military operation in Gaza must end.
I unequivocally reiterate to all actors in this conflict that civilians must not be targeted.
لقد آن الأوان لأن يرفع الجميع صوته عاليا.
Welcome back. I'm joined now by Amir Oren, the defense and government analyst from the Haaretz Daily. Thank you very much for being here. And Eran Singer, the Middle East editor at Israel Public Radio.
Hi, hello.
Thank you for being here. Now, Amir, I'm curious. We're hearing a lot of reports that the Palestinians have now united in terms of a ceasefire agreement, and that they're saying from the Palestinian side that it will happen within hours, possibly. But from the Israeli side, we're hearing mixed reports. Is this because the IDF stated time and time again that their mission is to destroy the tunnel infrastructure in the Gaza Strip? Would Israel stop all operations to have a ceasefire agreement?
Israel had a notional 3-stage operation when it entered Gaza, and it is still in the first stage, which apparently will be the one and only. It had another one for broader urban areas, and yet another one for the occupation of the entire Gaza Strip. But apparently, what it has right now will be sufficient. It will destroy whatever tunnels are at hand, will consolidate its positions in the lines it is holding, and it will evacuate in an orderly fashion once a ceasefire is in place.
And we just heard what the IDF is trying to accomplish, but what is Hamas trying to accomplish at this point?
As previously said, Hamas would like to have the victory picture to show their own people. They would like to show the Palestinian people, especially in Gaza, that they are the winners, that they have won this battle with Israel.
And what is this big victory?
In the last few hours, especially what's going on at the Ben Gurion airport, the fact that so many flights to Israel are canceled. All the international flights to Israel are canceled. From the Hamas perspective, this is a major achievement, and this is one of the things they're going to sell to their own people. That hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of Israelis were told to go to the shelters, had to go to the shelters during the last 2 weeks. But more than that, the achievement in the sense of what they did to the economy of Israel, by hurting the Israeli economy, by putting a blockade on Israel. This is
right. I mean, I was going to say this: the symbolism here that they don't have an airport in Gaza because of the blockade, and they've now effectively shut down many of the flight operations in Israel. It's
You're totally right.
Yeah.
Hamas is trying to tell their own people and to tell the Israelis, whatever you do in Gaza, we'll do to you inside Israel. If you launch rockets on Israeli cities or on the Palestinians, we will launch rockets on your side. If you penetrate the territories of Gaza, we will penetrate Israel. And this is what they've done so far, which means they would try to show their own people that they have the capability to hurt Israel. But I think that what they think is that they can do it by hurting the Israeli economy. As I said, this is something that they think will hurt Israel the most.
The Israeli economy can withstand a day or two, because we heard only over the last hour or so that the Federal Aviation Administration has extended by another day the suspension of flights, or at least the advisory opinion it issued to U.S. carriers to avoid flights, which of course they are going to obey. So the economy can withstand it, but Israeli prestige has gotten a terrible blow. Now, perhaps there is a political undertone to it in Washington, but if one tries to get the full picture, it seems as if this is good old American bureaucracy at work. It turns out that the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, has a rule book. And one of the regulations in the rule book has to do with the certain distance from a dangerous place to the fence of an airport, an adjacent airport. For instance, it is 5 miles from where you can fly a model airplane or launch a rocket if you're a student to the nearest airport. In the case of the rocket which hit Yahud yesterday, it should have been a mile, 1.6 kilometers. It was slightly more than that, but an embassy official went out to measure the distance, reported back to Washington that, lo and behold, it is this holy mile, and all flights were stopped. And for the last day and a half, Netanyahu and his officials have been trying every which way to put it back together, but nothing doing, because regulations are regulations and the rule book must be obeyed.
And Amir, you mentioned the economy. Tying into that, the latest reports show that Hamas leaders abroad have become fabulously wealthy, while the Gaza Strip has fallen deeper into poverty and despair. I-24 News correspondent Daniel Campos reports.
Hamas leaders are facing criticism inside and outside Gaza for enjoying a comfortable lifestyle, while Gazans bear the brunt of Operation Protective Edge. 1.8 million people live in the Gaza Strip, an area with a similar population density to Monaco, Gibraltar, and Singapore. But conditions in Gaza are far from similar to those locations. Unemployment rates reach 40%, poverty and the difficult living conditions under the corrupt regime of Hamas have made life very difficult for the civilians, but not for the Hamas leadership. As reported recently in an article by the Ynet news site, Hamas has millions in assets, and it seems that this wealth extends to the daily life of their leadership, while also increasing investments and mysterious fattening bank accounts. In the past days, Hamas has been the target of popular Egyptian TV hosts, who sharply criticize and parody Hamas political leader Khaled Mashal, stating that while the Hamas leadership lives in luxury hotels, it is abandoning the innocent Palestinian people who are being killed in their dozens.
طلع خالد مشعل من يومين يقول لك ايه؟ الجيش المصري. وشفتوا خالد طبعا بيجاهد ازاي في قطر. ده الجهاد بتاع مين؟ الاخ خالد مشعل. الراجل ده يا استاذ خالد الجهاد في غزة. حضرتك اهو بيتابع طبعا القناة بتاعتهم. ده الجهاد اللي بيتابعه خالد مشعل ورفاق خالد مشعل المجاهدين الافاضل الاكابر المحترمين. هذا هو الجهاد وسايب الناس تتقتل.
The Hamas political leadership under Mashal relocated from Damascus to Qatar with the outbreak of the civil war in Syria, and as ties between Hamas and the Syrian regime began to fray. In 2012, a Jordanian website reported that Mashal had control of a massive $2.6 billion, in large part deposited in Qatari and Egyptian banks. It is likely Hamas accumulated assets from years through donations, as well as its investment in various projects in the Arab and Muslim world. It is also known that, among other things, Hamas has invested in real estate projects in Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Dubai. And according to reports, Mashal did not always separate Hamas money from his own, maintaining a high level of secrecy by using different companies under the names of family and associates. Ismail Haniyeh also became a millionaire in the past few years. According to different reports in 2010, the Egyptian magazine Rose Al Yusuf reported that Haniyeh paid $4 million for an area of luxury in the Rimal beachfront neighborhood of Gaza City. He then purchased several homes in the Gaza Strip, but registered everything in the names of relatives, according to sources. It is believed that most of their wealth comes from the flourishing tunnel industry. Senior Hamas figure Haniyeh included were charged 20% taxation on all of the trade passing through the tunnels. While the Muslim Brotherhood ruled Egypt, constant money transfers of big amounts took place, but some senior Hamas members preferred the money to be kept in a safer place than the Gaza Strip, and invested in various Egyptian assets, often through business partnerships with Muslim Brotherhood officials. While business flourishes for Hamas officials, according to World Bank reports released in November, Gaza remains third in the Arab region in terms of poverty, ranking only above Sudan and Yemen.
And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a short while ago and discussed the possibilities for a ceasefire. Secretary Kerry also held a meeting with the mother of one of the abducted teens.
I just had the honor of meeting Secretary Kerry. We spoke for a few minutes. As an American, it was very meaningful for me to speak to him. He asked about Naftali, my son, and I described the brilliant student, musical, fun-loving kid we lost at 16. And he was asking if there's anything we can do. I'm sure they're doing a lot.
And as an update, Kerry will be flying back to Cairo after tonight's meetings in Tel Aviv. Now, assumingly, he's continuing the ceasefire negotiations. What's the latest from the ceasefire negotiations?
Well, according to some Palestinian officials, it's going to happen very soon. They're talking about hours. They're talking about the fact that the few next hours are critical. When it comes to the Egyptian initiative, they say that there is an agreement within the Palestinian fractions in the Gaza Strip. The question is, and this is a key element, everybody's talking about Hamas and Israel, but no one mentions the Egyptians. Mm-hmm. The Egyptians are saying out loud, we will not change the initiative, which means there is no way we're going to change the details of this agreement or this initiative, which means first a total ceasefire, and only then starting to negotiate the other terms like opening or lifting the sanctions or the siege on Gaza, opening the crossing of the borders. No. They say, the Egyptians, no way. And this is what Hamas demands. Hamas still saying, no way. We would like to discuss first all the details concerning lifting of the siege on Gaza, and only then we'll discuss we'll start the ceasefire. So this is a very crucial point here, because I would like to emphasize something. It's very important for Egypt, not only for Israel, to show that Hamas are not the winners here. Because if Hamas wins in this battle, it is a very bad message to the people of Egypt regarding the Muslim Brothers. Because a victory of Hamas is a victory for the Muslim Brothers. And this is not a good news for Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the president of Egypt.
So for an Israel-Hamas ceasefire, we're waiting on Egypt? Is this kind of the scenario right now?
All the issues that Iran listed, and he's totally correct, but of all the issues, none is intractable. There were several instances of false alarms or false hope, including last week before the ground action began. But this time it seems for real, because if we take them one by one, the more concrete and faster the concession to Hamas is, the more Egypt is going to get from the U.S. as a quid pro quo on other fronts which have nothing to do with Hamas or Israel. For instance, the U.S. aid, which Congress froze to Egypt, at least partially, after the military coup, which made Sisi first the de facto ruler before he was elected president. This can be unfrozen. There are, in diplomacy, of course, you always have give and take. So Egypt, again, following up on what Iran said, Egypt would have it seen as if it was a concession to the population of Gaza, the civilians who are going to enjoy some more freedom or some more economical benefits, rather than Hamas. So the victory will be the Palestinians rather than Hamas.
And the joining of the two the Palestinian factions regarding the ceasefire agreement, is that surprising?
I think that all the Palestinian organizations are with Hamas today. Hamas have shown that, I don't think that Hamas was willing to have this crisis with Israel. I mean, they didn't plan it to happen. For them, it was very good if Israel didn't retaliate after what happened. But Hamas had no other choice, and then they started shooting rockets. And by that, I think that they show that they are the ruler. They want to be the ruler in the Gaza Strip. They are the sovereign in the Gaza Strip, which means everything that will be now discussed, even though the Egyptians are saying that they haven't mentioned the word Hamas even once. When Egypt is asked, they say an agreement between Israel and the Palestinian Authority concerning Gaza. They never mentioned Hamas because they don't recognize Hamas. But everybody knows that Hamas are strong, and I think that what we're going to see in the next few days is a stronger Hamas in their eyes. Hamas will try, as I said, to market this war with Israel as a very great achievement.
Well, they're striving for legitimacy.
Legality and adherence to international practices and borders is very important to the Egyptians, which is why they insisted on Israel going back to the international boundary and not neither annexing nor even conceding territory to them in the peace agreement in 1982. And therefore, they now border the Palestinian Authority rather than the Gaza-controlled Hamas, and they insist on having whatever agreement with Mahmoud Abbas as the president.
I see. Now we go to Ben Gurion International Airport to our correspondent Shachar Peled. Shachar, what's the status there of flights?
Well, first of all, we've just learned that the FAA, the American Federal Aviation Administration, has decided to extend once again for 24 hours its halt of flights into Israel. This is in continuation to other carriers which have already decided to do this earlier today. Lufthansa, which owns the group of Brussels Airways, Swiss, and more companies which have decided not to come for a further 24 hours into Israel because of the ongoing situation, and Delta Airlines, which independently decided it would halt its flights into Israel. Behind me you can see the billboard. Many flights have been cancelled today. 80, which is a third of the flights Ben Gurion Airport is used to. 209 flights, however, did take place today, with some 32,000 passengers arriving and departing from the airport. We've spoken to many of them throughout the day. The frustration indeed indeed grows. We know of some 3,000 or even 4,000 passengers, Israeli passengers, stuck in Denmark, in Turkey, in Cyprus, in Germany, without the ability to come back to Israel. And many tourists here who wish to leave the country, specifically because of the ongoing operation and the very harsh situation here, and not able to leave. So indeed, this is a strategic and symbolic victory to Hamas, managing not only to influence the day-to-day and routine life here in Israel, but also the flights and the vacation of the Israelis. And if one knows Israelis, you do not want to mess with their time off and their vacations.
Absolutely
and this
not.
is definitely enhancing the frustration.
Yes,
absolutely.
Well, Shachar Pella, thank you very much for these updates from Ben Gurion Airport.
You know, Meredith, Israel and Israelis are often criticized for not being very strict in following orders or in standing in line, for that matter.
That is true.
But others are sometimes too strict and, as it turns out, too panicky in obeying orders. There were several instances last night where planes which were on their final approach to landing turned around at the announcement that the flights are going to be cancelled and went back to their airport of embarkation, even though in 5 minutes everybody could have been off the plane. In another case, a U.S. carrier started boarding. People have been sitting, at least partially, in their seats. All of a sudden, the captain told them to get off the plane immediately, and the plane took off only with the crew aboard. There was no reason. There was no reason for that because there was no danger. A rocket fell more than a mile away a few hours earlier in the morning. But all of a sudden, they seem to behave as if they are in the middle of a war zone, which was not the case at all.
We were discussing what Hamas will tell the Palestinian people after achieving a ceasefire. I mean, what have we won, or what have we gained? I would like to say a word about the Israeli government and what the Israeli government is going to tell the people of Israel, because it has many achievements, this operation. And I think that the numbers that Israel is showing, I'm not talking about all of them numbers, I'm talking about specifically about 200 terrorists. This is the number that the army is now talking about, 200 terrorists dead or killed by the IDF.
And some captured.
Yes, captured and now being investigated. The tunnels. According to some army officials, Israel has damaged the infrastructure of the tunnels in the Gaza-Israel border, which is very significant. And to be more precise, this is what Prime Minister Netanyahu said at the beginning of this operation. He never said that this operation is targeted or will bring about the end of Hamas. He never said that. He said to damage the Hamas infrastructure. And this is exactly what has happened so far. So if the people of Israel will ask, what have we achieved? I think that the government has some very good answers to this question.
And as Iran just said, Amir, 200 out of how many terrorists killed?
Well,
how many people are involved in
estimates vary, but approximately 15,000, perhaps 20,000. Not all of them are fighters, but when this confrontation started out, Hamas had 6 brigades. In each brigade, you have several battalions. They had other units. So it is, in a way, comparable to what Hezbollah suffered in 2006. They lost 600 fighters. They are still being deterred, as we are speaking now, 8 years later. 200 fighters out of 20,000 is only 1%, but morale may be hurt. It remains to be seen. But regarding what Iran said about the achievements that the government will put forward, Netanyahu will also have to answer for several issues. How did we get to that position? You always promised that you will take care of Hamas, and all of a sudden we find ourselves, for instance, with this tunnel problem which mushroomed. And the cost. If Israel has more than 30 soldiers and civilians killed, it is not certain that the Israeli public will view it as in a cost versus benefit analysis as a cost-effective operation. Justified, yes, but whether it was conducted competently, that is still an open question.
And on the other side, Hamas will find it very hard to answer the question, are or were 700 Palestinians justified? Was it justified to have 700 Palestinians dead in this crisis? This is the number they're talking about right now. 700 Palestinians dead, more than 4,000 injured. We're talking about hundreds, maybe thousands of houses that were demolished in this operation. This question, or these numbers, will be given to the officials of Hamas, to the leaders of Hamas, and they will be asked, was there any justification to these numbers?
Right. I mean, are the people in Gaza going to be outraged at Hamas at this point for such a huge loss of life?
Yes, they are going to be outraged. Whether they can express their outrage in a fashion which will not risk their lives is another matter. If there was a Fatah underground waiting for the last 7 years since they were expelled in 2007, waiting for the moment, or an Israeli-led militia, this would have been the time to rise with arms and get Hamas kicked out of Gaza. But apparently no such force exists.
And you know, it's interesting because, as you mentioned, Netanyahu made promises in a way that he would take out Hamas. In Omer times, he was saying this. And we've seen what Hamas has been up to. They've been tunneling, and I don't know if it's a surprise. It's a surprise to me how many tunnels they're finding. Is this a disappointment to the Israeli population that this isn't their mission now? The mission is security?
The quantity and the quality of the tunnels were certainly a surprise. The fact that there are tunnels, this in and of itself is not a surprise. They have been exposed, revealed several times. Of course, Gilad Shalit was kidnapped through such a tunnel 8 years ago. But yes, the scope was a shock to many Israelis, along with the fact that some of them could pop up under the feet or under the houses of people who live next to the Gaza borders. So yes, either the government did not prepare the public for this, or else the government itself was not conscious of the real impact of this problem, even though it was listed in all of the intelligence assessments.
And that begs the question, so why isn't the mission to take out Hamas?
So things have changed in the last few years, especially after Hamas took over the Gaza Strip. And I'm not talking about the Israeli-Gaza border. I'm talking about the region. I'm talking about the neighborhood. Things have changed. We are now witnessing the change. The area has totally changed. I'm talking about Syria. I'm talking about Iraq. I'm talking about organizations like the Islamic State, which are now conquering more and more areas in Iraq and Syria. And I'm talking also about extremist groups that are now trying to face or confront Hamas and other Palestinian organizations in Gaza. So the thinking was that Hamas will be able to act as the police officer of Israel in the Gaza Strip, which means Hamas is the ruler, and they will be responsible for telling these organizations not to shoot rockets on Israel. I think now...
And for a time it worked.
Yeah, it worked pretty well. So one should not forget that it's not only Israel and Hamas we're discussing. We have been saying that for a long time now, that everybody's saying that whenever this question is raised in Israel, what will happen if Hamas... Why don't we kick Hamas out of the Gaza Strip? Everybody always says, you should always remember that the devil you know is the devil. I mean, better devil. How do you say it? Better devil you know than the devil you don't. Which means nobody really knows what's going to happen if Hamas goes out.
Chaos, and you mentioned the Hamas policing. I mean, we know that Hamas has members of some of these more extreme organizations in Hamas jails.
Yes, but what happened was, at first, after Operation Pillar of Defense, at first, Hamas, as a general rule, refrained from firing and restrained the other organizations. Then it was willing to let them do it without encouraging them. Then it encouraged them, and then it even gave them rockets to fire into Israel. Now, the Israeli Defense Forces have another version of events, contrary to the one Iran recounted. They think that Hamas wanted this escalation, especially after Israel took on Hamas in the West Bank, that Hamas escalated it to the point where Israel retaliated, and then we got to the point where we are now. Whether it's really that simple, that neat, remains to be seen when Marshall and others are going to tell their narrative.
Well, that is an appropriate note to end here. Amir Oren and Ron Singer, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And we are going out to another 2-minute break, but be back soon.
The real answer to the danger of flying is not to stop the flights, but to stop the rockets which are endangering the flight.
Israeli military operation in Gaza must end.
I unequivocally reiterate to all actors in this conflict that civilians must not be targeted.
لقد آن الأوان لأن يرفع الجميع صوته عاليا.
Welcome back, and with me now is Vivian Berkovich, the Canadian ambassador to Israel. Thank you very much for being here this evening.
Thank you for having me.
And we also have joining us Rafael Jerusalmi, a former Israeli military intelligence officer. Thank you for being here.
Good evening.
Now we've been talking about the negotiations so far in the program, and it really seems like a race to who will concede at this point. Who can we predict will take the jump, if we can?
The race to the jump in
to the
what
ceasefire.
Sense?
I'm sorry, to the ceasefire, because now we have the two Palestinian factions who've now united. The Palestinian Authority backs Hamas's demands, and the Egyptians are saying, no, we are not changing. We are not changing the ceasefire agreement in any way. So what next?
Well, I think it's a very good question, and I think that everybody, certainly Canada, and I'm here to, of course, represent Canada and speak about Canada's views and policies in this region. Canada has supported the Egyptian intervention in a ceasefire kind of role right from the beginning. So the expectation and hope would be that the PA and Hamas, but primarily Hamas, would enter into the dialogue for ceasefire negotiations.
And as you said, the Prime Minister's through fire and water.
Yes.
Canada will stand with Israel. I mean, Canada is very, very pro-Israel. It backs Israel in so many ways.
Well, Canada, I mean, is pro-Israel, but Canada is also viewing this, clearly it's in the immediate context, it is a conflict on the ground and in the air to a degree between Israel and Hamas. And there's, again, then we have concentric circles where the conflict broadens. But Canada has made very clear that it views this as a free world versus terror conflict. It's a much larger issue. Israel may be on the front line and may be the frontier of this conflict, but it will not stop there. And all anyone needs to do is look around the world and take a quick glance in this neighborhood, certainly, and you'll see it's a much, much broader problem. Why there is so much global focus on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a whole other issue. But Canada sees it as an Israeli-Hamas immediate conflict, but as a much broader conflict and something that the country feels very strongly that it is our duty as a democratic nation to stand up against the spread of terror.
We've seen rallies turn violent around the world, and Canada has not been an exception to this. In Calgary, the rallies turned violent. Mm-hmm. That was quite an episode. But we do understand that the pro-Palestinian side of that rally has apologized for the events that took place there.
It's a very disturbing development, and Canada has a reputation for being very peaceful and home to very reasonable people. We've all had our share of conflict, ours perhaps less dramatic than other countries and other regions, but that sort of conduct and dialogue is very, very disturbing and very concerning, particularly in the context of what is going on in Western Europe.
Right,
and other countries.
And we will be back here, but we are going to the Gaza border live to our correspondent Jonathan Reggett to give us updates. Jonathan.
Yes, Meredith, a very dramatic times here at the Gaza Strip. We begin over there at the northern Gaza Strip. For the past half an hour, we're seeing flares, tens of flares flying up in the air, a lot of smoke rising up in the air. We do not know exactly what is going on over there at the northern tip of the Gaza Strip, but this has been going on for about 30 minutes. A lot of flares up in the air, smoke coming up. This has been going on for at least 30 minutes. And just a few minutes ago, we've heard of red alerts, sirens sounding in Ashdod and places further north in Rishon LeZion, Holon, and we just saw the rockets flying out of Gaza. Literally, this place about 2 kilometers behind us, we saw at least 10 rockets flying out of the Gaza Strip and into Israel. Just a few seconds later, we heard of the sirens being heard in cities in southern and central Israel. A very, very dramatic evening going on at the Gaza Strip. Behind us, we can also report of many shells and explosions to that side, the southern side of the Gaza Strip, towards Khan Yunis, towards Rafah. Obviously, a very dramatic evening behind us at the Gaza Strip.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for these updates. And as you said, central Israel and apparently the Ben Gurion airport are experiencing sirens. Rockets are being fired at them. We will be joined at the Ben Gurion airport by our correspondent Shachar Peled very shortly to discuss this. But Rafael Yerushalmi, we have seen talk about this race to the ceasefire. The Palestinians are saying that it could be hours away. Israeli sources are saying, no, it might not necessarily be that close. Is the IDF trying to finish their operation of what they've stated to take out all the tunnels before any ceasefire will be met?
Yes, of course. From the start of this conflict, we have been led by the Hamas. We have been led into war by the Hamas, a war we didn't want. We're now being led into a ceasefire at the time that they want. And we do not really want that time, fortunately for us, only fortunately for us, because we would accept a ceasefire, a serious ceasefire, if there was one to accept. There isn't one. Because the military branch of the Hamas and also the prior conditions the Hamas has laid down do not permit to have a serious discussion yet. But this, of course, is good for us because we have to finish the job. Would we have a ceasefire now? It would be a ceasefire that would last 6 months to a year. There are 4,000 missiles left in the Gaza Strip. We haven't destroyed all the tunnels yet. There are many terrorists still armed and hiding in the Gaza Strip. So this ceasefire would not last. The longer the operation will go on, the longer the quiet after the ceasefire will be. This is like mathematical.
So you think at this point Israel will not call a ceasefire?
No, they will not.
Until...
I would just say, like, for instance, one idea would be that even if we do reach a ceasefire very shortly now, one of the Israel's conditions militarily would be to ceasefire but not to retreat. So we stop the fighting, we stop the shooting, but we continue looking for the tunnels. I mean, you can do that without fighting. If the other side would let us...
Do you think that would be a scenario? Do you think Hamas would let the IDF just take out
right now,
their
Hamas
infrastructure?
doesn't want anything. Hamas is very interested in Israelis shooting its civilians so they can complain to the United Nations. That's what Hamas is interested about. As it cannot kill our civilians, or very few of them, it's trying to kill as many soldiers as they can to show that there was a reason for their war. They're even trying to kidnap one for exchanges. They are trying a lot of things, but what they are really trying the most is to lead us into a conflict we do not want, to lead us inside the Gaza Strip, inside the very densely populated areas, which is, of course, a huge problem when you don't want to hit the civilians, but also a big danger for the soldiers, but they want that. So right now, I would be thankful to the military branch of the Hamas that they don't want the ceasefire.
Okay, and we thank you for that. We are going now to Ben Gurion International Airport, where our correspondent Shahar Pellet is standing by. Shahar, did you just have a siren there?
Well, we heard sirens that went off in southern Israel and in cities and towns in the southern part of central Israel, in the area called the Shfela region. These echoes of sirens were heard also here in Ben Gurion Airport and caused a slight panic. Passengers ran inside the arrival area and asked where are the secure structures and the shelters. But I was told here by some of the guards and police forces that a siren in Ben Gurion Airport would be heard very loud, and there are many shelters around us. But this once again emphasizes the fragile and sensitive situation. Only yesterday, a rocket landed in the city of Yahud, about a mile away from the airport, thus causing the ban of air flights and carriers cancelling their flights into Israel from the FAA and European carriers. And so this is a very sensitive time. Any alarm in this area, in this very strategic and sensitive area, might cause a panic, and we are very much on alert here. We'll inform back with any change or news from the ground.
Right, and Shahar, we do see a bunch of red letters behind you on that screen saying that flights have been canceled. You've been talking to travelers. What are they saying?
Well, we've talked to a group of Israelis, for example, who just came back from Zurich, but their flight was supposed to land yesterday back from Switzerland. They landed only today after going through Milan and waiting for several aircrafts to book them. People are talking of a very big headache and a lot of problems trying to get back, let alone the Israelis stuck, thousands of Israelis stuck in cities and towns all across the world and not being able to come back. There are some flights of Israeli companies, of El Al and Al Kia, which are increasing their number of flights to try and bring back as much as possible Israelis home. A flight came back today from Cyprus with Israelis stuck there, Israelis from Turkey and Greece coming into Cyprus in flights bringing them back home. But the frustration, as we feel, is growing. People had to stay in the airport for about 8-10 hours before they could
I see. Well, Shahar, thank you very much for these updates from Ben Gurion International Airport. And we do go live to a press conference that the leader of Hamas, Khaled Mashal, is holding. Let's listen to his words.
Khaled Mashal, he is talking about the victory that the Palestinians have achieved in their battle with Israel. The Israelis have never thought that we will be able to confront them this way.
ولم تكن تمارس تجارة الأنفاق بل كانت تمارس إبداع الأنفاق.
He's talking about the tunnels, the achievements that were made with the tunnels.
أثبتت أنها كانت تعد، كانت تطور، كانت تبني، كانت تصنع، كانت تهرب، كانت تخدم وتسهر من أجل شعبها. وجاءت لحظة الحقيقة.
He's talking about.
كما قال الشاعر عن آخرين أصقل سيفك يا عباس.
He's talking about how the tunnels have helped the Palestinians for the goals.
وضخ الدم الوطني في روح أبناء فلسطين جميعا. ابن حماس، ابن الجهاد، ابن الشعبية.
He's talking about the blood of the Palestinians for the resistance against Israel.
لماذا انطلقت فتح والشعبية والفصائل والجهاد وحماس؟ انطلقوا على طريق الجهاد والمقاومة ومواجهة المحتل وتحرير الأرض واستعادة القدس. غزة آية ونموذج. هذه غزة برهان الله للعالمين.
He's talking about Gaza as a symbol for a victory. No one has imagined that Gaza will be able to defend itself the way it did.
بل لم يكن التفوق للمقاومة في الميدان وفي الإبداع وفي الإنجاز فحسب.
It was not only a victory in the field.
الشعب الإسرائيلي يعلم أن بيانات الجيش
He's talking about the Israeli people. He said that the Israeli people have been given false information by the army of Israel.
أنهم في حالة مخاض وتيه بينما كتائب القسام والأجنحة العسكرية إذا قالت فعلت وإذا وعدت وفت.
He's saying that everything that we have promised to do, we did. We didn't only talk, we did. Not only Hamas.
الأجنحة العسكرية فصدقوها. ثم تفوقنا عليهم في الميدان الأخلاقي. هناك تفوق أخلاقي للمقاومة.
He's talking about the moral
نتهم أننا نستهدف المدنيين ولم يكن يوما ما
effect, the moral element of the victory.
لكن لا تقولوا إن المستوطنين مدنيون.
He says there is no way that one can claim that the settlers in Israel are civilians. They're not civilians. He's trying to justify killing of civilians, of settlers, according to Mashal.
ليس المجندين الإسرائيليين فقط بل قادتهم بل نخبتهم لواء جولاني. نتنياهو يعلون أخرجوا لنا خيرة ألويتكم. أبطال غزة لهم بالمرصاد.
He's calling Netanyahu and Yalon, the defense minister, to send to Gaza their best men, their best soldiers, because we can face them.
إذا تفوقنا أخلاقيا. الدليل الواضح شهداؤنا مدنيون وقتلاهم عسكريون.
He's saying that our victims are civilians, but on the other side, their victims are soldiers, and this is a victory for us.
نعرف أن إسرائيل أقوى منا ومدعومة من
We know that Israel is stronger than us, but we said in the past, and some have hesitated,
من يتشكك؟ أقول المقاومة لن يكسرها أحد بإذن الله.
No one can challenge the resistance of Hamas.
يتحدثون عن نزع سلاح المقاومة.
They're talking about
لن يستطيع أحد أن ينزع
dismantling the weapons of Hamas. Nobody will be able to dismantle Hamas. No way.
إذا بدك تعملوا ندية هناك شرطان لنزع سلاح المقاومة.
There are two conditions for that.
انتهاء الاحتلال والاستيطان
the end of occupation and to dismantle the weapons of Israel.
ولماذا مكابرة؟ هو الشعب الفلسطيني أقل من الإسرائيليين؟
Why not?
حتى على المستوى الإنساني العرب والمسلمون وعلى رأسهم وفي قلبهم أهل فلسطين ليسوا أقل من شعوب العالم. لا ولذلك حواراتنا
We are not less than others. We're not less than the Israelis.
وبعضهم كان رسميا قلنا نقول لهم تعودتم أن تعاملوا بعض القيادات في المنطقة بطريقة الفوقية ونحن لا نقبل.
You have got used to challenge us, to deal with us as if you are superior. No way, no more. We are the true owners of the land. They are the thieves of this land, the Israelis, according to Mashal, and we are the true owners of this land.
لا تنقطع أبدا ولا تسهو أو تغفل عن هذا الشعب العظيم الذي يئن أهل الشجاعية وحي التفاح وخزاعة.
He's now calling the residents of the neighborhoods of Gaza that were targeted by Israel. In every corner in Gaza.
الحرة التي جعلها الله آية وستظل آية وستظل نبراسا للأمة بل لأحرار العالم إن شاء الله. لا شك هناك كارثة.
There is a disaster in Gaza.
الشهداء
Until this moment, more than 680 martyrs. Most of them are women and children. Netanyahu, the loser, he says, came into Gaza.
لأنه تعود على العملاء تعود على الاختراقات ولكن غزة
But Gaza,
العظيم ماذا أقول في أهل غزة إحنا مؤتمر صحفي لو قلت شعرا لما وفيتهم حقهم 1,800,000 في بقعة صغيرة محاصرون منذ 8 سنوات واجهوا الحصار وأبدعوا.
The people of Gaza for so many years have confronted the occupation. They were able to confront Israel.
3 حروب فضلا عن العدوان المستمر. صنعوا حياتهم من جحيم الموت.
The Israelis have made the lives of the Palestinians a total hell.
عندنا في غزة ملحمة لذلك
We have a war in Gaza.
غزة غزيرة ينتقم منهم نتنياهو. الآن تقريبا أكثر من 1000 بيت هدم تهديما كاملا. أكثر من 15,000 بيت هدم جزئي.
More than 15,000 houses were demolished.
ولم يخرجوا من الوطن. لن يخرج الفلسطينيون من أرض الوطن. بل سيعود أهل الشتات.
The Palestinians will never leave their homeland. They will come back to their homeland.
ربما كانت المسافة مسافة النازحين واللاجئين في عودتهم إلى أرض الوطن بعيدة نسبيا. بعد حرب غزة قصرت المسافة إن شاء الله.
Maybe the way that the Palestinian refugees have had was very long, but today it's shorter.
المجازر، هدم العمائر كما قلنا، هدم المستشفيات، كم مستشفى هدم حتى اللحظة؟ كم مسجد قصف
mosques, destroying hospitals.
نحن الضحية وليست
we are the victim.
إسرائيل يا بان كيمون.
Not Israel or Ban Ki-moon. We are the victims.
إسرائيل الضحية.
Israel is not the victim.
بل شعبنا الفلسطيني
But
هو
the
الضحية.
Palestinian people are the victim.
يا كيري ويا قادة العالم الحر.
Or
الذين
carry.
سهل عليكم عجزا نفاقا أن تتبنوا الرواية الإسرائيلية. مجلس الأمن هب سريعا إلى عقد جلسة من أجل التحقيق في ظروف
is discussing or is about to discuss.
الماليزية.
The Security Council
لا شك أن هذا يؤلمنا جدا.
was discussing the targeting of the Malaysian plane so fast, but when it came to the Palestinians, it didn't happen.
نعزيهم وعزيناهم من قبل. لكن هذه قضية إنسانية بامتياز.
This is a humanitarian issue.
جريمة لا أخلاقية بامتياز أن يقتل أهل غزة بهذه البشاعة.
Isn't it a humanitarian issue when people are killing Gaza? Netanyahu has failed when he was revenging and hurting the Palestinians. Netanyahu never reached the warriors of Hamas. He only hurts the civilians.
إسرائيل في موضع الضحية ليس نابعا فقط من الموقف الغربي التقليدي بل نابع أيضا أنهم استكثروا على الشعب الفلسطيني أن يدافع عن نفسه وأن ينتصر وكأن الضحية ينبغي فقط تصفع وتزهق أرواحها وتسفك دماؤها. نحن الضحية رغم انتصارنا.
Even though we won this battle, we are still the victims. And we will continue to defend our people and our land. I'm calling upon the states and the peoples and the organizations, the humanitarian organizations,
ومنظمات المجتمع المدني أن تهب
سريعا بنجدة غزة لا
تنتظروا وقف الحرب بعد الحرب نعم إغاثة وإعمار
don't wait to the end of the war.
وكسر للحصار من الآن غزة تستحق أن يضعها العالم على رأسه فخرا بها، وإغاثتها حد أدنى من أداء الواجب.
Gaza needs the support and
أدعو
help.
أن تفتح المعابر
Gaza needs, and the border crossings should be open to Gaza.
وأن يسمح للقوافل والإغاثة والفرق الطبية وأدوات الإيواء
and the medicine groups and humanitarian organizations should be let inside Gaza.
المدارس المتبقية. نريد وقود، مواد غذائية،
we need gasoline,
كهرباء،
electricity, medicine supplies.
يتألم صدقا أو ادعاء على هذا البعد الإنساني فيطرح التهدئة الإنسانية. نحن أحرص الناس على تهدئة إنسانية.
When it comes to the humanitarian issue, we are the most, we need it the most, and we will be the first to demand it.
أي تهدئة إنسانية بهذا المعنى، وليست التفافا على مطالب المقاومة والشعب. أي تهدئة إنسانية مدعومة ومعززة ببرنامج إغاثة حقيقي يقدم لأهل غزة.
If there will be a humanitarian ceasefire, it will be accepted.
لا نوصد بابها ولكننا لن ننخدع بتوظيفها.
But we will not surrender when it comes to our terms.
هذه المرة
This time,
يبدو أن الفشل الإسرائيلي فشل نتنياهو المتكرر.
It seems that the failure of Netanyahu is used to having failures.
جاء الطلب بوقف الحرب مبكرا ليس بطلب منا. أقولها في هذا المؤتمر، أنا رئيس المكتب السياسي.
I am the head of Hamas, and I'm telling you, my people, I'm telling you.
أبادر ولم أطلب من أحد إلا فقط أن تقف الأمة والأحرار مع أهل غزة ومع أهل فلسطين. لكن من الأيام الأولى بدأت الدعوة إلى وقف الحرب.
There are calls for the end of this war.
من ذلك أن نتنياهو في ورطة.
We have been told that they want us to end the fire, and that this is why we understand that Netanyahu asked for it.
اللي مش عارف الخبايا والخفايا، السيد جون كيري وزير الخارجية الأمريكي هو الذي اتصل
He is the one who called
الخارجية في تركيا وقطر وطلب منهما
the foreign ministers of Qatar and Turkey, and he asked them to act and to go to Hamas, to convince Hamas to accept the ceasefire. After Turkey and Qatar started their talks with Hamas, this process began.
لا نقبل من أحد أن يتاجر بالدم الفلسطيني، فبالتالي قطر وتركيا نعرفهم جيدا. هم مخلصون لا يتاجرون.
We have confidence in the Turks and the Qataris,
تاريخهم معنا معروف.
And we know that they're with us.
لكن الجميع يريد أن يخدم، ونحن لا نعترض على دور أحد.
We're not against anyone who wants to help us.
إنما عندما نعترض على شيء نعترض على مضمونه على طريقته. أما نرحب بجهود الجميع من أجل
We welcome the efforts that are made by everyone to seize the fire
وإنهاء وكسر الحصار
and to end the siege over Gaza.
على أحبابنا في غزة.
In Gaza.
شراسة الميدان لا تضاهيها شراسة، لأنها من جرائم نتنياهو اللي إن شاء الله لن يطول الزمن يا نتنياهو ويا علون ومن سبقكم ومن سيلحق بكم حتى تقادوا إلى محاكم الجرائم الدولية.
It won't be long till you, Mr. Netanyahu and Yalon, you'll have to face international court.
سوف يلاحقكم جيلا بعد
The people of Palestine will keep on
ربما يحسب الأمور معكم.
tracing, running after
هذه
you.
المعركة الشرسة على الأرض يوازيها معركة أخرى شرسة في ملعب السياسة والدبلوماسية.
He's talking about the diplomatic war right now that is going right now.
أن نذهب سريعا إلى القبول بوقف إطلاق النار.
Everybody wants us to accept immediately the ceasefire proposal.
على مطالبكم. رفضنا هذا.
We didn't accept it.
المنهج هذه
This way,
القاعدة في التحرك مرفوضة
this principle in which we were told, we were ordered to accept the position or the proposal, the Egyptian proposal. And we will keep on not accepting it. What are our conditions? We have legitimate conditions. We told the Turks and the Americans Everybody knows our conditions. Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen knows everybody knows our conditions. And everyone who will be able to fulfill our conditions will be welcome. First of all, the siege should come to an end.
لا نقبل منكم غير كسر الحصار ونحن لا نخون الأمان نخونها في رمضان لا في رمضان ولا غير رمضان ضاق شعبنا بالحصار 7 سنوات 8 سنوات
7, 8 years we had the siege on Gaza.
الذي فرض علينا الانقسام الحصار منذ 2006 عقوبة لشعب فلسطين لأنه انتخب عبر صناديق الاقتراع ممثليه وكانوا
He's talking about the elections in the Palestinian territories and what happened afterwards.
السريع اليوم الحصار وسنواته العجاف قتلت من شعبنا أضعاف ما قتلته الحروب. لشعبنا حق في الحياة.
The internal war within the Palestinians have hurt us more than the wars outside.
بالقتل والدمار. وفي عرفنا وفي العرف الإنساني والقانون الدولي القتل بالتجويع والحصار كالقتل بالرصاص والنار. القتل البطيء مثل القتل السريع كله عدوان وجريمة حرب.
He's talking about that there is no difference between fast death or slow death. They're all war of crimes, international crimes.
حصار الشعوب الحرة يحولها إلى قوة انفجار.
When you put the people's wanting the people's freedom under siege, you make them explode. I told one to a European official, you have seen how Gaza exploded in front of whoever tried to confront it. After years of killing and occupation, the people of Palestine will explode in front of everyone. But everyone who will support us and help us, we will help them. There are 6 demands of Hamas. After all this war and the bloodshed, and what happened to the people of Gaza, the children of Gaza, the women of Gaza, Mr. Obama and Ban Ki-moon, all leaders of the free world, tomorrow, in the future, we'll see the people of Palestine freed on their freed land.
بعد كل هذا الإبداع الذي أتحدى أنه موجود في التاريخ الحديث أو القديم. طب السؤال، أعطوني الفاتورة، ما هي الفاتورة المطلوبة؟ كم جندي إسرائيلي تريد أن تعود نعوشهم إلى أمهاتهم؟
How many Israeli soldiers dead do you want that will be brought back to their mothers?
إسرائيل اعترفت 33 قتيل.
Israel has said that it had 33 soldiers dead. And our numbers are much higher.
أن الأرقام أعلى وأعلى، خاصة في ظل الحصار والرقابة على الإعلام الإسرائيلي. ما هي الفاتورة المطلوبة من قتل الجنود الإسرائيليين؟
What is the check that you want us to give you in Gaza?
طب إذا كل هذه الفاتورة مش كافية، فهمونا ما هي فاتورة استعادة.
Let us understand what is the price of getting Jerusalem back to the Palestinians, of letting the refugees come back to Palestine. Shalit, the soldier Shaul,
ورتبهم حتى تقول هذه الفاتورة يمكن أن نبيض فيها السجون الإسرائيلية. وخاصة القادة العظماء من حماس وفتح والجهاد والشعبية والديمقراطية، كل أبناء شعبنا العظماء والمستقلين، هؤلاء القامات العظيمة، مش عايز أسمي أسمائهم لأن أسمائهم معلومة حتى لا أنسى أحدا منهم، ولكن هم على الرأس وفي
the names of the killed are known.
وكما قلت لحسن سلامة وصلت رسالتك، أقول لكل إخواني
I'm saying to all the brothers,
من أسرى فلسطين بكل تلاوينهم ومنظماتهم، رسائلكم وصلتنا من زمان.
your messages have,
القسام والكتائب العسكرية
we have got your messages,
إن شاء الله
and we will be happy to let you free. It's talking about the prisoners that are still in the Israeli prisons.
أن يعلم إنه خلاص آن الأوان لكسر الحصار. ما حدش يراجعنا بأقل من ذلك. الآن في إجماع.
Now there's consensus.
اليوم بالبيانات اللي صدرت أمس في رام الله.
After the announcements that came from Ramallah.
أجمعت عليها الفصائل. في غزة الفصائل وقوى
and the announcements made by the Palestinian fractions and organizations, there are very well-known terms for the end of the fire. Someone asked me, how, till when? We would like a ceasefire today, but if they want to try us, we are patient. 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, 2 months. But we
وبشكل مؤكد وليس وعدا أو تفاوضا لاحقا.
We need the siege to be over. It doesn't have to happen at in full size. It can happen in stages.
ولا أحد مستثنى من ذلك. لن نقبل أي مبادرة لا ترفع الحصار عن شعبنا.
We will not accept any initiative that will not contain the lifting of the siege.
من 10 أيام والبعض يقولون يا جماعة مش عايزين دماء إضافية. خلينا بسرعة حفاظا على دماء الفلسطينيين نوقف إطلاق النار ثم نتفاوض. طب لو بدأنا من تلك اللحظة وتفاوضنا عبر الوسطاء وصلنا لاتفاق، مش كان وفرنا الدماء؟ لماذا إذا كنا عايزين نكسب الوقت لقد ضاع الوقت؟ لماذا لم نفعل هذا؟ هذا يدل أن هناك نوايا مبيتة عند الإسرائيليين اللي بيصروا على هذا الموقف.
He's talking about the fact that the Israelis wanted the initiative, and it meant that they had their own willings from this initiative.
صارت اليوم بالحصار. اليوم إسرائيل قلقة مما جرى في مطار بن غوريون.
Israel is today frightened of what happened in Ben Gurion Airport.
بعض ما يذوقه أبناء شعبنا. هل تريدون حصارا مقابل حصار؟
Do you want siege versus siege?
اليوم المقاومة في غزة إن شاء الله غدا في الضفة قادرة أن تحاصركم.
The resistance in Gaza today is able to confront you not only in Gaza but also in the West Bank.
معروف التاريخ. الضحية الشجاعة ذات الكرامة.
If you are a victim, a brave victim,
تدمي مقلة الأسد مع أن الشعب الفلسطيني ليس بعوضة.
And he's talking about the Palestinians.
لستم أسودا.
You are able to do what you want.
أما أنتم يا أهل غزة وأنا
You people of Gaza.
إن شاء الله أنتهي سريعا. هذه غزة تستفيض فينا الكثير. أنتم يا أهل غزة رمز العزة وأمل الأمة. بعثتم الروح في أمتكم. رفعتم رؤوسنا جميعا.
You have made us all very proud.
رأسكم وأعلى شأنكم.
You made us have our heads up. You have shown that you are able to protect your lands and your honor. He's now addressing the refugees, the Palestinian refugees around the world, and say,
لكن تأثيرات هذه العظمة هذا الإبداع هذا
الصمود is promising that what happened in Gaza will also help the refugees, the Palestinian refugees.
لقد ملكتم علي قلبي حين زرتكم إن شاء الله والله أتمنى أن أكون بينكم. وكل إخواني، ليس كل إخواني، كل أبناء فلسطين بل الأبناء الأمة يتمنون أن يكونوا معكم، يألمون كما تألمون ويفرحون كما تفرحون.
Everybody is today happy. Not only the Palestinians, the entire Arab nation is happy today.
وتقاتل معه وتضحي معه وتتحمل معه. ولا أريد أن أخص أحدا، لكن لا أستطيع أن أتجاوز النموذج الأخير. دكتور خليل حية ضحى من قبل بجزء من عائلته، واليوم ضحى بجزء. رحم الله عوائل الشهداء جميعا.
He's talking about a Hamas official who was killed, Khalil Khaya.
في قيادة حماس في كل المواقع. نحن وأبناؤنا
We and our sons and our daughters
وكل ما نملك فداء
and everything we have is for Gaza.
فداء لأهل خزاعة والتفاح وكل أحياء غزة.
We are all with the residents of the neighborhoods in Gaza and the refugee camps and the prisoners in the Israeli prisons.
هذه الروح التي تدب فيهم. نحن فداء لكم.
He's talking about the spirit of the Palestinians today after what happened in Gaza.
أيها أهل الأحبة في غزة في الضفة في
My beloved Palestinians,
أعطيتم الكثير لكنني أدعوكم إلى مزيد من الصبر.
I need more patience from you. This is Ramadan now.
مفتاح النصر آخر آية في سورة آل عمران. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اصبروا وصابروا
You should be patient,
واتقوا الله
as it says in the Quran.
إن شاء الله ستفلحون.
And in the end, you will succeed.
صبروا ساعة اصبروا وصابروا. أمتكم معكم.
Your nation is with you.
شايفين العواصم كلها، الأمة العربية والإسلامية وأحرار العالم، دول عديدة، الناس معكم، لن يخذلوكم ونحن لن نخذلكم.
We'll not disappoint you.
نحن لن نخذل أهل غزة.
We will not disappoint the people of Gaza.
إذا كنتم تموتون صمودا، والله أنا وإخواني في قيادة الحركة مستعدون أن نستشهد من أجل أن نرفع الحصار عن غزة.
If you will die for Palestine, we will be ready to die for Palestine.
آمل إنه معركة غزة العظيمة توحد الصف الفلسطيني.
I hope that what happened in Gaza will unite the people of
تآمر
Palestine.
العالم عليها أول المتآمرين نتنياهو. اليوم
Today,
دم غزة الغالي إن شاء الله يوحدنا.
the precious blood of Gaza should unite us.
ضروري تكون على أسس راسخة. اليوم الحمد لله
Today, thank God,
يصطف خلف مطالب الشعب الفلسطيني. 6 مطالب قدمناها للجميع.
everybody is behind the 6 demands of the
لكن
Palestinian
مطلوب
people.
خطوات أخرى. نريد أن نصطف أيضا مع وقف العدوان عن غزة ورفع الحصار عنها، وأن نصطف من أجل تحرير الأرض وإنهاء الاستيطان.
We don't only want the end of the siege and the Israeli aggression. We want the return of the refugees, the freedom of Jerusalem.
نريد أن نصطف
We would like
في أن نعمل في خندق واحد، وأن نطوي صفحة المفاوضات، وأن نطوي صفحة التنسيق الأمني.
We would like not only to talk about the siege of Gaza, we would like to talk about the whole package of the negotiations.
الانتفاضة الأولى أن يقاتلوا جنبا إلى جنب، والدم ما بصير مية، وأصالة شعبنا نثق بها من كافة الفصائل. ورحم الله الشهداء العظام ياسر عرفات وأحمد ياسين
will help all the martyrs
وخليل الوزير
and all the officials of Hamas who died or were killed. The West Bank.
الآن تتململ وتنهض، وأنا واثق أن جذوة الأصالة والمقاومة في الضفة الغربية الآن بدأت تسري ولن تعود إلى الوراء.
That what's going on in the West Bank will not go backwards.
وانتصروا لأنفسكم. وأهلنا في 48 الحمد لله اليوم أثبت شعبنا في غزة أنه انتصر على الحصار والعدوان، وأهل الضفة ينتصرون على الاحتلال والاستيطان، وأهل القدس على التهويد، وأهل 48 على الأسرى.
It's not only a victory that should be accomplished in Gaza, it's a victory of the settlements in the West Bank. The steps made to make Jerusalem Jewish, it all should be confronted.
وشكرا لأحرار العالم. أما المجتمع الدولي
As it regards the international community, America, we call America to change its policy.
أبشر القتلة الإسرائيليين بجولدستون 2 و3 و4 وأنهم سيلاحقون كمجرمي حرب.
He is promising that what IDF did in Gaza will be dealt with like what happened in the Goldstone report, and you will be facing international law.
Could you say there's been a breakthrough in the last few hours? Second question, what would that breakthrough be? Have you received any indication from the US that they would be willing to offer some kind of guarantee for a lifting of the siege along the lines of what you've spoken about? So is there a breakthrough? What is the breakthrough? And indications from the US?
هناك جهود كثيرة لكن لا أستطيع أن هناك اختراق حقيقي.
There are many efforts, but there's still no breakthrough regarding the ceasefire.
على قاعدة وقف الإطلاق النار ثم التفاوض. مسؤولون أمريكان
Officials, American officials,
بعد وقف إطلاق النار.
said to us that they will give us guarantees after the ceasefire. No, it's something that we'll not be able to accept.
هو اتفاق على نقاط محددة منصوص عليها بدقة تضمن وقف العدوان ورفع الحصار وتحقيق مطالب شعبنا ثم يكون على
demand a written
عندي سؤالين. الأول
statement.
التقيتم الرئيس الفلسطيني محمود عباس وبحثتم موضوع وقف إطلاق النار. على ماذا
And we are coming back now to the studio. That, of course, was Hamas leader Khaled Mashal holding a press conference in Qatar. Ambassador Berkovich, what do you make of his comments tonight?
Well, I think they're very interesting. One might look at those as a prelude or an overture to negotiating for some form of ceasefire. But I'll leave it to others who are much more expert in interpreting those signals than me.
And an expert would be sitting here.
Well,
yes.
It's an excellent speech. It's one of the great classics of Middle Eastern diplomacy.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as he started the speech, I told my neighbor that he's asking for a ceasefire. And of course, he's not going to say a word about it because we're in the Middle East, and he's going to claim victory. The fact that he claims victory is what he was waiting for. The Hamas was waiting to be able to show something for what they've done. Apparently, Khaled Mashal estimates that he can do so. So already we've got that first step. They can claim points or victory. This is the first step to the ceasefire. Then he threatens Israel and he accuses Israel, so that's classical. This has been said for almost a century now, hasn't changed, it will never change. And he continues. I think he hasn't lost his sense of humor when he says that the IDF is lying to the Israelis, whereas the Hamas television is completely lying to its own citizens. He hasn't lost his sense of humor when he says that if the Palestinians die for the cause, he is ready to die for the Palestinians, because, as you know, he's been hiding in a bunker for 15 years. So he hasn't lost the sense of humor. But in between all the lines, in between the accusations, that he wanted to spread after he announces victory, he starts the bargaining. He reminds us a few times, 6 points. He reminds us that he's willing, at first with the Turks, with Qatar, but also in the end, also with Kerry. At the very end, Kerry is also a partner for negotiation. And in the end, the Israelis also accept the Egyptians. So slowly, but he doesn't say so, and he's not going to tell you anything else. And of course, as he's asking for negotiation, he puts the stakes very high.
Mm-hmm. And Iran, thank you for being back with us.
Which is absolutely legitimate. That's how you negotiate. You start high, and then you bargain. So typical Oriental, Middle Eastern speech, not very innovative. Good news, because I think he's starting to break. Bad news, because he hasn't changed. And the rest is up to the politicians and the diplomats.
If I may add, you were talking about the sense of humor of Khalid Mashal, and he said that not only that we demand the end of occupation, we demand that Israel will be dismantled. The Israeli weapons will be dismantled. This is a sense of humor. This is being Khalid Mashal being very cynical, but this is Khalid Mashal. But it was not only a speech against Israel, it was a speech against Egypt. And this is the major point here, because he said we are not willing. He never mentioned the word Egypt because Egypt never mentions the word Hamas.
Right, and you made this point earlier in the conversation.
He said we will not accept any proposal that will not guarantee, will not give us the guarantees that we will be able to discuss right now all the conditions that we demand. So don't talk to us about ending the fire first and then going to the conditions or going to the negotiations, which means Khalid Mashal said, no way, I'm not willing to have a ceasefire, but when you talk about a humanitarian ceasefire, this is a totally other story here.
Yes, you have to remember that he hasn't got the backup from the military branch of Hamas. He's speaking or mostly for himself, maybe for Haniyeh and some political members of the branch, but right now on the ground he has no support and no acceptance of what he said by the military commanders of the Hamas.
Well, Rafael Jerusalemi, Ambassador Berkovich, and Ransinger, thank you very much for all being here this evening. And we do move on. The situation in Gaza and Israel became one of the top stories in the world and in the streets of major cities. Thousands of people have taken to the streets to show their support for Israel or for the Palestinians. I-24 News reporter Ori Shapiro on the protests, the violence, and public opinion of Operation Protective Edge.
The battle between Hamas and Israel is moving to the streets. Thousands of people around the world are expressing their support for or against Operation Protective Edge. In some cases, the tension is high, almost as high as on the battlefield. In Boston on Tuesday, pro-Israelis and pro-Palestinians nearly went eyeball to eyeball, with police between them.
The same type of ideology that motivated the Intifada was the same ideology that motivated the Marathon bombing. And I'm just astounded that this would happen in Boston.
I really hope it brings awareness to what's going on in Palestine, and I hope it gives some condolence to the people who are over there in Palestine who are suffering right now.
Dozens of other pro-Palestinian protesters stood in line in San Francisco as President Barack Obama arrived in the city for a fundraising event. The United Kingdom also seems split in its support. Thousands of people came out to support Israel on Sunday, a day after at least 15,000 pro-Palestinians protested in London. And in France, a demonstration against Israel offensive turned violent as participants looted stores in the Paris suburb Sarcelles. Police had to break up the protest with tear gas and rubber bullets. The incident astonished not only Jews, but the residents themselves.
We live in Sarcelles. We have no problem with the Jews of Sarcelles. No problem at all. These are people who have come, they vandalized, they burned. We in our neighborhood, we don't want to do things like that. Those are people from someplace else who came here and did this.
Israel and Palestine are always an easy target for protesters, while other conflicts persist in the headlines, but somehow far from the public eye. As the operation continues and the death toll grows, it seems that everyone has a solid opinion and no one can remain indifferent to the situation.
Welcome back, and I'm joined now by Dr. Ishai Menuchin, the Executive Director of the Public Committee Against Torture in Israel. Thank you very much for being here this evening. And we're also joined by Professor Abraham Sion, a former Israeli Deputy State Attorney. Thank you very much for being here. Now, the topic I really want to delve into is the UN Human Rights Council has announced after a session today in Geneva that it will open an investigation into whether Israel is committing war crimes in this current crisis. How would you respond to that, Professor?
Well, I'd say this is the basics of hypocrisy, because we have had something like 10,000 missiles over Israel, the whole part of Israel, particularly in the Negev. And this is, of course, a travesty against international law, and it's a war crime. Well, it's a double war crime. On the one hand, It's using civilian cities to target, and also they're using their own civilians to have like a human shield to protect them. Now, who is to blame? I mean, who is to stand trial? Israel, who is trying to pinpoint, to cause as little as possible casualties in Gaza, with all the trouble of getting the civilians out, while the Gazans are sending the missiles they are targeting missiles on civilians, not on military installations, but on civilians purposefully. So the whole thing is a hypocrisy. It's something which it's a repetition of the Goldstone report, and of course, first of all, they have decided to find out the Israeli war crimes, not both sides' war crimes, not the Palestinian war crimes, but the Israeli in particular. So they already defined what the committee should do in this respect.
And Dr. Minuchin, how would you respond to this?
I think it's a mistake because both sides took actions that seems that probably are war crimes. Both sides target civilian neighborhoods, of course the Hamas with the missiles, but the Israeli army too. Targeting homes of Hamas leaders, for example, it's not allowed by international law. And I have to say that I hope that this committee will check both sides, not only the Israeli sides, because I accept totally Professor Zayan's point that the Hamas did war crimes too. But it's very easy to look on the other side war crimes and not to taking into account your side. And we, Israelis, really did few things that people should look at. And actually the Turco Commission, the Israeli Turco Commission, said that we have a problem with investigating our own crimes.
But the Israeli army is not inside its own civilians. Hamas is fighting within its own civilians. Is this not a war crime?
To use human being as a human shield, it's a war crime. Of course, they are doing so. But it's very easy to look at them and to say they are committing war crimes and not seeing that our side are doing the same. Because if I can count rightly, there are 3 Israeli dead civilians and more than 550 Palestinian dead civilians. I mean, we know that around 663 Palestinians died the last days, and 540 of them are civilians, more than 160 are children. So it's not that we are trying so hard not to target civilians.
How would you respond to that?
I'm quite surprised about what you're saying. To put an equation between Israel and the Palestinians, Israel has never targeted civilian population, never. A civilian population, as you agreed with me, are hiding. They are acting as human shields. They are forcing them to be there. So when you have to target military installations, like using a hospital as a place where you can shoot from, this hospital stops being a hospital according to international law. And the same thing is with those the heads of the terrorist organizations in Gaza. These are legitimate targets under international law. So Israel has to respond. Israel has kept quiet for many weeks to go. It got all these missiles and did not respond until it couldn't take it anymore, and it had to respond because there were something like 80 missiles going on Israel without Israel responding. When Israel went into this war or into this activity, it was only after many missiles were sent on, particularly on civilian targets. While Israel is not targeting civilians, that civilians are bound to get killed because they are acting as human shields, and also because it's a very congested area. You cannot pinpoint, you cannot take one person and hit him without hitting other people. But Israel is doing things that no other army in the world, not even armies of the Security Council, not the Russian army and not the American army and not the British army did it, neither in Afghanistan nor in Iraq nor in other places. That we warn the people, warn civilians, tell them to go, and if they don't go, we warn them again, and then we tip them and we phone them. Can you tell me, is there any precedent to such an activity of an army?
But let me put you in the civilian shoes there for a moment, Professor. What are Gazans supposed to do when they're told to leave their homes? It's such a small area of land. Where are they supposed to go? And as we heard from a UN worker there earlier today, he said that 140,000 people are taking refuge in just 83 schools. And so if you also consider the Palestinian narrative of many residents living in Gaza had to leave their homes now currently in Israel and then left to Gaza, it's this the trauma of losing your home, and as we've seen, thousands of homes are being destroyed in this siege. I mean, what are civilians supposed to do?
No doubt about what you're saying. A war is not a picnic, and a war is not a thing that anybody likes. And in this war, the Gazans are the most people who are suffering most of all. And the suffering is caused not by the Israelis. It's caused by the Palestinians. Because once the Palestinians stop firing, all you need is to have the Palestinians stop firing. And that's the end of it. But they're not stopping. And they're continuing. And they can see their people suffering. And yet they are still sending rockets into Israeli cities and Israeli villages in the kibbutzim and so forth. So this is the outcome of war, unfortunately. But Israel, on the contrary, is doing whatever it can to make it easier for these people to leave their homes and not to get caught between the fire. No other state in the world has ever done that before.
And we are not doing the same. There is one thing that I want to talk about. I mean, I heard that they started. I mean, both sides have this narrative of the other side started. We are starting to count with the missile. They're starting with invasion and Palestinian killed in Gaza a month before that. I mean, each side, this 47 years old conflict, each side can find where he can blame the other side that they started. And my problem is that my government, Israeli government, and of course the Hamas government too, are not trying to find solution. They are dealing with victory, who will have the photo of victory, and who started it, blaming the other side. No one cares about the civilians that are dying or targeted both in Israel and in Palestine. Both sides are blaming the other sides and don't care about the other side's civilians. And we have to admit that there is only political solution. And looking at this operation without talking about the 47 years of occupation, it's wrong, because it's only one small chain in long chain of 47 years of occupation that my government don't want to.
But I do need to draw a line, respectively, what you said about both governments not caring about civilians.
As the other side civilians.
The other side civilians. Yeah. I see what you mean.
I repeat, this is a repetition of occupation. We totally withdrew from Gaza. Let me first of all point out that Israel is not occupying anything. Judea and Samaria and Gaza, under international law, belong to the Jewish people. Under international law, I'm not talking about the Bible, I'm talking about international law. It was promised on the Balfour Declaration, and then it was under San Remo, and the British mandate was supposed to be established in Palestine to establish a Jewish state. Now, Israel withdrew from Gaza, totally, to the borderline, to the armistice borderline of 1948. And some of us, unfortunately, call it occupation. Where is the occupation? There could be, they could have put all those billions of dollars which they put in those tunnels, they could have put them, build houses, and it would have been something like Monaco, something like the south of France. It could have been a wonderful place to live in. But they don't want that, because they still have, under their proclamation, that their aim, that avowed object, is to annihilate the Jewish state of Israel. That's what they want.
Well, we will be coming back to studio, but we are going now to the city of Ashkelon, where our reporter Shai Ben-Ari is standing by. Shai, what's the latest from that area?
Yes, Meredith. Well, concerning that earlier barrage of rockets fired towards central southern Israel, we could see those rockets actually leaving Gaza right behind us, basically coming from the direction of Gaza behind those smokestacks. You can see the rockets leave the strip, and you can see them for a few seconds. They light up, and then they disappear into the sky, and a few seconds after that, you hear the thuds of interceptions and occasional landings. We know that basically these rockets were targeting towns to the south of Tel Aviv, Rishon LeZion, and we also understand that sirens were heard in the area of Ben Gurion Airport, a reminder, of course, of how serious the security situation right now in Israel really is, and other, of course, obvious repercussions that we've been talking about for the past few days with the cancellations of flights. So other than that, there hasn't been much going on, but that was a barrage of around 12 rockets from what we understand, and probably not the last we're going to hear this evening. That brings the total of rockets fired around this day probably will end up around the 100 number, and it seems that Hamas is aiming for something around that number every night now to prove that its capabilities are still intact.
Well, Shai, thank you very much for these updates. And now coming back to you, Dr. Menuhin, you were saying how both sides, you believe both sides just want victory at this point. Neither is willing to make concessions. So what can happen with the ceasefire if you feel like no side is willing to compromise?
And no side is willing to compromise, and it will have, somehow we'll find some sort of solution, short-term solution to this conflict, and in 2 years we have another conflict. It's ongoing conflicts that will happen because nobody cared about.
But is this Hamas's mentality, perhaps, to blame for this?
It's, you know, I remember there was Amnon Birman, and a journalist, once wrote that it's good that the Palestinians understand the language of power because this is our mother tongue. Both sides don't speak different language. We know only how to use power, and they know only how to use power. Nobody really wants to find peaceful solution, political solution to this ongoing issue. And if nobody cares much about the political solution, we will continue to have conflict in Gaza with better names maybe in the next future. The computer will produce us not protective edge, but something else, cast-led, and etc. And the Human Rights Council of the United Nations will find another committees that will come to check what's going on here. We need to break this line. We need to find better life to the people that lives here, Israelis and Palestinians. And it seems that not the Israeli government, and of course not the Hamas government, are willing to find a way to finish this ongoing conflict.
I want to say two things in answer for this, and I think I rest my case. First of all, how do you know whether people who sign an agreement, a peace agreement, really mean that? What's the sign? What's the lackmus?
And there is so much lack of trust in this region. This is a major issue here.
There is one major sign. How do you teach your kids? How do you teach them in schools? How do you teach them everywhere? When you teach your children that the highest esteem they can get to is to blow themselves up in buses and in public places to kill as many Jews as possible, this shows you that there is no intention of peace. So this is one very main sign. And the second sign is that the Palestinians, I'll ask you another question. How do you know who started? I would say that if the Palestinians stop firing, there will not be firing. There will be no firing.
This is what Netanyahu said. Calm will be met with calm.
If the Israelis stop firing, there will be firing. So now you know who is beginning and who is the culprit. When the Palestinians will stop firing, there will be no firing. There will be a peaceful state.
Concluding remarks, please.
Yes, concluding remarks. I heard all the youngsters shouting, "Kill the Arabs" in the street the last week, and it seems that our wonderful education system really produce horrible, nationalistic.
So you're saying that Israel is doing the same thing?
In Israel, I'm saying. I mean, the education system of both societies are not trying to teach democracy, human rights, peace. Look at the product of the Israeli education system, first thing. Second, we are talking about occupation of 47 years, even though I understood that that my colleagues don't believe in that kind of occupation. He don't see it's occupation. But in 1967, Leibovich, Izhar and others told us, look, people under occupation will uprise because they are not willing. They are not willing to live under occupation. And actually, even in Gaza, it's the biggest prison ever because not us and not the Egyptians are letting them to have better life, to have, when they have nothing to lose, so they are willing to fire rockets.
Before 1967.
And please do make it quick because we are approaching the end of the program.
Before 1967, there was no occupation. But the PLO was established for one reason only, to annihilate the Jewish state of Israel. So let's not talk about uprising and about occupation.
Well, on that note, we do finish. I apologize. We have run out of time. Dr. Milukin and Professor Sion, thank you very much for being here, both of you, this evening. And that sums up this special edition here on I-24 News. Thank you for watching.